This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily Carter, and I wanted to share it on the channel. I'm 32, so Halloween isn't exactly as fun and exciting as it used to be. Usually I just put up some decorations, hand out candy, and spend the evening watching movies. This happened in 2022. I spent most of that morning cleaning my house and picking up candy from the store, getting everything ready for the trick-or-treaters that night. Around 3 in the afternoon, I left my front door slightly cracked open so I could hear if anyone was approaching. Then I turned on a movie. Our neighborhood isn't very big, so we don't usually get a ton of kids, but this year felt different. I hadn't had a single trick-or-treater for 2 hours. I got up and looked outside. The whole street was empty and quiet. I figured maybe Halloween wasn't as big of a deal anymore, but I still hoped a few kids would show up, so I stayed ready. It wasn't until around 6:30 that I finally heard the first ring at my doorbell. I grabbed the candy bowl and walked toward the door, but when I got close, I froze. Someone was already looking into the house at me through the small opening. They were wearing a costume, a white mask that covered everything but their eyes. Since I had left the door cracked open, it was unsettling to see them peeking in like that. I tried to stay calm, walked over and held out the candy bowl, telling them to take a handful. As they reached in, I noticed something strange. They were alone. No parents, no friends, just one tall figure standing silently in front of me. Something about them felt off. They were much taller than most kids, and when I got a closer look at their eyes, I could tell they weren't a child. The whites of their eyes were bloodshot, and there were dark circles beneath them. I thought it was weird, but didn't say anything. Maybe it was just an older teen trying to join in on the fun. When they finally walked away, I set the bowl down and went back to watching my movie. About 15 minutes later, I heard what sounded like a soft footstep right outside my front door. Thinking it was another trick-or-treater, I got up again, but when I turned around, my heart stopped. Someone was standing inside my house. It was the same person, the one with the white mask. They were standing just inside the door, completely still. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The masked figure stared at me for several seconds in total silence before slowly stepping backward out the door and disappearing into the night. I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I looked out the front window and saw them walking down my driveway, glancing back at the house several times. I quickly shut and locked the door. Something was seriously wrong. This wasn't some teenager pulling a prank. This was an adult. And the fact that he had just walked into my house made me feel sick. I decided to call the police. As I pulled out my phone, I heard footsteps outside again, but this time there was no knock or doorbell. My heart pounded as I crept toward the pier hole. A man's voice called out, "Hello, I'm looking for my kid. Have you seen them?" Through the pier hole, I saw a man in his mid-40s wearing a brown, long-sleeved shirt and blue jeans. He looked normal enough, but something about his tone made my skin crawl. I stayed silent. The man looked around for a few seconds, then leaned closer to the door. That's when I saw his eyes, bloodshot, surrounded by dark circles. My stomach dropped. It was him. I backed away, clutching my phone, and quietly finished my call to the police from another room. A few minutes later, I checked the front window. The man was gone. When the police arrived, we searched the area and found a white mask and parts of a costume hidden in a bush beside my house. It looked like he had torn it off in a hurry. He had been pretending to be 2 different people, the masked trick-or-treater and the concerned father. They never found him that night. I just hope he didn't find someone else or manage to do whatever he was planning. Thank you to Emily Carter for sending in this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in. It might be featured next. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Lauren Pierce, and I wanted to share it on the channel. It was late October. I was a sophomore at university, sharing a dorm room with a girl named Kylie. She was a great roommate, friendly, outgoing, and always surrounded by people, while I was the quieter, more reserved type. When Halloween weekend came around, Kylie invited me to a party at one of her friends' houses off campus. She said I'd have fun, maybe meet some new people, and at least it wouldn't be another night stuck in our small dorm room. At first, I said no. Parties weren't really my thing, but after a little convincing, I gave in. That evening, I picked up a cheap ghost costume from Spirit Halloween. Honestly, it looked awful. And around 8 o'clock, Kylie ordered an Uber. The house was only about 10 minutes from campus, but once we got there, it felt like we were in the middle of nowhere. The road was empty except for one large house lit up with orange string lights and inflatable decorations all over the yard. Inside, it wasn't too crowded. Maybe 15 people, all around our age. We played games, had a few drinks, and for the first time in a while, I actually had fun. But by around 1 a.m., I was tired and ready to leave. Kylie was completely drunk and told me she was just going to spend the night there. I didn't feel comfortable asking any of the other guys for a ride. Most of them were just as drunk. So I stepped outside and tried to figure out what to do. I opened my Uber app, but the ride was over $30. I barely even had that much in my account. Maybe it was the alcohol clouding my judgment, but I told myself, it's fine, I can just walk. A 10-minute drive would be, what, a 35 or 40-minute walk? That didn't sound so bad. I started down the road, leaving behind the glow of the house and stepping into darkness. The further I walked, the quieter it got. The streetlights were spaced far apart, so I'd walk through long stretches of complete darkness before another light appeared in the distance. That's when I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't moving at first, just parked on the side of the road. But every few minutes when I looked back, it seemed to be a little closer. I couldn't be sure. Maybe it was just my imagination. Then, suddenly, it was gone. I turned around again, and the road behind me was empty, only a thin layer of fog floating across the asphalt. I kept walking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After a few minutes, I heard an engine rumbling behind me. I turned around and saw a car emerging from the fog, but its headlights were off. It slowed down until it was right beside me. A man was in the driver's seat. He had a patchy beard and a strange, crooked smile. He asked, "Where are you heading? It's a bit late to be walking out here alone." My heart pounded. I forced a small, polite smile and said, "I'm fine, thank you," then kept walking. The car inched forward, matching my pace. "Come on," he called out. "I'll give you a lift. You shouldn't be out here by yourself." His tone had changed now. Sharper, almost demanding. I looked over at him again, and his smile was gone. His face was tight, his eyes locked at me with a cold, aggressive stare. I tried to respond, but my voice caught in my throat. Then, before I could react, he slammed the car into park and threw the door open. That was when I saw headlights cutting through the fog from behind us. Another car was coming down the road. The man froze for half a second, then quickly got back into his vehicle. I ran toward the middle of the road, waving my arms, desperate for the approaching car to stop. As soon as the headlights reached us, the man sped off into the fog. The car that stopped was driven by one of the guys from the party. I recognized his face, but didn't even know his name. I told him what happened, still shaking, and he immediately offered to drive me back to campus. I don't think I've ever sobered up faster than I did in that moment. If that other car hadn't come down the road right then, I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. There would have been no evidence, no witnesses, just another missing college girl who never made it home. Thank you to Lauren Pierce for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in. it might be featured next. The story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Ryan Matthews, and I wanted to share it on the channel. It was Halloween night. I was in 8th grade at the time, and my friends and I had decided that this would be the first year we were too old to go trick-or-treating. For the past 10 years, it had been our tradition. But now we didn't know what else to do. Most of my friends chose to stay home, hand out candy, or just watch movies. But my best friend Tyler and I wanted to do something different, something that still felt like an adventure. That night, I went over to Tyler's house, and he told me about a place he'd heard of, some kind of abandoned tunnel or old mine hidden deep in the woods a few miles south of town. I'd heard vague rumors about it too, but no one we knew had ever gone there. Tyler managed to get directions from one of his buddies, so we decided to check it out. We hopped on our bikes and rode across town. There were still a few people walking around in costumes, but as we got farther away from the neighborhoods, the streets grew empty and quiet. When we finally reached the edge of the woods, there were no houses, no lights, just darkness. We locked our bikes to a nearby tree and followed a narrow, muddy footpath that Tyler's friend had mentioned. It wasn't a real trail, just a beaten path from people who had walked it before. Branches scratched at our arms, and a few times we had to stop to figure out where the path even went. Tyler had the only flashlight, so I stayed close behind him as we pushed deeper into the woods. It took about 40 minutes before we finally reached a small clearing. On the other side, at the base of a hill, was a hole leading straight into the ground, the tunnel. Even from a distance, the inside was pitch black. The air around the entrance felt heavier, colder. Tyler shined his flashlight toward it. Dust swirled in the beam of light, and the tunnel stretched endlessly forward, carved from rough, uneven stone. We both stood there in silence, just listening. Then, out of instinct, I turned around and glanced back toward the woods. For a split second, I thought I saw something move near one of the trees, a shadow shifting between the trunks. "Tyler," I whispered, "shine the light over there." He swept the beam across the trees, but nothing was there. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just nerves. Trying to shake it off, we both stepped into the tunnel. The air was thick with dust, and each step echoed endlessly down the passage. The further we went, the more it felt like the darkness was swallowing the light from Tyler's flashlight. Then, suddenly, we both stopped. We heard something ahead of us. It sounded like a voice, faint and distant, almost like a whisper. The echo carried it toward us, repeating and distorting the sound until it was impossible to tell what it was saying. Tyler froze, holding the light steady, but beyond the beam there was only endless blackness. Without saying a word, we both turned and started walking quickly back toward the entrance. As we moved, the whispering grew louder, not just echoing now, but closer, like whoever it was following us. I glanced back, but even just a few feet behind us was complete darkness. When we finally reached the opening, Tyler stopped so suddenly that I almost ran into him. Standing about 10 yards ahead, in the middle of the clearing, was a man. He wasn't wearing a costume. He was just standing there, facing us, motionless. Tyler and I didn't say a word. We just bolted. We sprinted into the woods, branches whipping against our faces, hearts pounding. I didn't dare look back to see if he was following us. We didn't stop running until we couldn't anymore. When we finally slowed down, gasping for breath, we realized we had no idea how far we'd gone. Using the faint glow from Tyler's flashlight, we managed to find our way back toward town. As we walked, we tried to make sense of what happened. We think the man outside the tunnel was waiting for us, maybe to trap us inside or to block the only exit. It sounds crazy, but why else would a grown man be standing alone in the woods on Halloween night near an abandoned tunnel he clearly knew kids might explore? And the voices we heard inside? Maybe they were his friends. Maybe they were waiting deeper in the dark. We'll never know for sure, but one thing's certain. If we had stayed in that tunnel just a few seconds longer, that man could have been standing at the entrance, cutting off our only way out. Thank you to Ryan Matthews for sending this chilling story. If you have a story, send it in. It might be featured next.